I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to everyone to our work session. We are going to start with 1.3, which will be the EDA Committee Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the really only update is that the committee has completed their work and had a meeting a week and a half ago, made a few edits to that report. And the note that I just got from Bruce last night said that the majority of people approved the committee report, nobody objected to the committee report, and there were no substantive changes to the last draft of the committee report. So that will be on the agenda for next week for the board to take action on. Now, there's a whole lot of minutia about what that ends up looking like. And I'm not sure what you're looking for from me relative to a recommendation around that report or the data that you want around that report, and maybe that's what we could have a brief discussion about. As I've told that committee and I've told the HRA board and the HLDC board, my recommendation would always be that we have a single combined authority for efficiency, and that we I have the mics on. Is that working? You getting anything? We're going to sit real quiet so you can't test, but it should be working.
I'm just going to take it out in the hallway in case my volume goes really bad.
So anyway, that's the context of the conversation for next week would be to determine if, when, and what action the board wants to take relative to that committee report.
Okay, so Jeff, I have some questions, but since Jonathan is here,
Yep,
let's
we
go
can-
back
we can go back to
to
number
the
one.
tax forfeiture, and then we can come back, okay?
Yep. Mhm.
That be okay with the board? All right, welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, so I think Kay's gonna be here as well. Thanks for being here as well. You can jump up here or sit there, whatever you wanna do. So I guess I don't know how many questions you guys or what type of questions the board will have. But I thought it was important, and I think Jeff agrees, that given the US Supreme Court case that came out, I think we're all aware of Tyler, the state had to redo the statutory scheme of tax forfeiture. The big issue is why does the county or why does the state get the money over the taxes owed? Because we, of course, are required by statute to sell all our tax forfeited land at market value, not for the price that it actually forfeited for, which can be a significant difference. So now we have to give that money, that overage, back to the previous owner. That creates its own issues as tracking them down. Generally speaking, properties, the owner of properties at tax forfeit, we can't find them, or they would have paid their taxes. Generally, we would tell them, hey, you're gonna lose your property. And Kay does very, very well at trying to get a hold of those people. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how many of them we can track down going forward, and how many of those cases we have here in Hubbard. It's a much bigger issue down in the cities that it's millions and millions of dollars down there that they're dealing with, which is why the fund is so big. All right, so
Jonathan,
Yeah.
so I have a question on that,
Yeah.
just for what you talked about. So I owned a property, you can't find me.
sure.
How many years do you have to hold on to the money, and does the state hold on to the money, or does the county?
Sure. The way that it's going forward, it's going to be both, I believe. And that that 85 and 15, 75 and 25 for depending on the classification of the property. And then we'll hold on to it 7 years ultimately. Statute of limitations is 6 on it. So 7 would be about right. But there is a statutory scheme in place for us to go to the court and have the court basically declare the money abandoned and put it in the general fund.
Okay.
That process I have not had to do yet, obviously, but it'll be a learning experience for me the first time we do it. I assume that will be a normal course of business as the years go on. I just haven't done it yet, so I couldn't say exactly what it'll look like, but it'll be a petition to the court saying we've tried everything. Here's all the evidence we have that we've published. We've done these things to try to find this person or people. We can't. It's been this amount of time. Order that the money is ours, Your Honor. And that should be a pretty straightforward process. So going back to the beginning, Tyler came out. It got kicked back to the Minnesota District Court. They consolidated all the cases in Minnesota into one case, and that is Tyler versus Hennepin County ET all. We are not a named party. For some reason, I had in my head that we were in Hubbard, but we are not a named party, which means that we have until August 15th to opt into the state payout structure or go with the state. I highly recommend we do not opt out, as the state is putting up $109 million. And ultimately, we're gonna have to pay our share of that regardless of if we opt in or not. And that's because of the statutory scheme going forward and how they're doing it. I don't know, do you have that slide?
So you want the deck? Is
Yeah,
that
why
what
don't we
you
do
want?
that?
'Cause-
I was gonna do this off the cuff, but this slide is so helpful that we might as well use it. It walks through exactly what I was gonna present to you. So legislative response to Tyler decision, $109 million into an account from the state. There, in Hubbard County, if you are interested, I know of at least one case, if not two, where there are individuals waiting to see if they can get their money back from them, and they are represented by the TSC law firm. They've just been waiting to figure out who they need to talk to. It's gonna be, a company is doing the actual claims. So if somebody here in Hubbard County has a claim, they won't go through us. They'll go through the state claims administrator, which is a private company, that will give them up to 90% of what they're owed, which is an amazing amount of a percentage when it comes to a class action. It's usually like 10% if you've ever been involved in a class action and got your check for $25 or whatever. It's usually almost nothing. 90% is amazing, and the state's putting up that 109, but they want part of that back. And as a result, so before we get, well, I guess in Tyler, let's go through the slideshow. You can go down. That's the Minneapolis case, or the Hennepin County case. Not, in the case itself, the Supreme Court ruled that the state can't take the overage. That money has to go, it is deserved to be going back to the person who owned the property, who had that value. All right, down a little bit more. So the 109 million, all right, so the three buckets of forfeiture properties. So there are the properties that forfeited prior to 2016. We don't have to worry, we don't have to do anything about those. Those are generally on our tax rolls, either through conservation land or they are back on the tax rolls as we've sold them. Generally, I think they fall into those two categories. There might be a third. But anyway, for purposes of this new legislation, prior to 2016, we don't have to worry about it. The first issue is 2016 to December 31st, 2023. That is the claim period. That's what we are liable for as a county, and statewide, what every county is liable for, is the overage for that 2016 to 2023. Hennepin and, I can't remember the other county.
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Got different dates.
Yeah, they have different dates. They had they had the named parties in that suit, so they negotiate a little bit different. With the property that we have on our rolls, or that has tax forfeited from that time frame, we are now required to sell it. And we have to sell it for fair market value, as we always have. But if that doesn't work, we then have to take the highest bid, regardless of what it is. And that's because that money is what the state is counting on to pay back the $109 million. And that is when we take those properties. And do you happen to know how many we have? I know Kay did a list. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've got a list, Jonathan. It's dozens.
Yeah.
It's not hundreds. It's
Right,
dozens.
we're in that 20 to 40 range, somewhere in
I
there.
want to say it's 3 to 4 dozen, yeah.
Yeah, and we're just gonna have to sell those, and we have to give 75% at this time until 2027, 75% of that sale price, taking out the taxes owed and the administrative costs. So we take that off the top. Whatever's left over, we get 25%, the state gets 75%. And again, that's the state trying to recoup their $109 million.
So the dozens that are they mostly in, within city limits or town limits, or,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yep. Small lots within cities.
so hopefully there would actually be then some development through that sale.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, what happens if some of it's just not saleable?
So what I've learned is we sell it at estimated market value the first round, and then the second round, we can sell it just pretty much for what taxes are due, and what is assessed on the property.
Well, sometimes the amounts that are due are hiding, people wanna pay, what happens then?
If nobody buys it, then all we have to do is show the state that we made best efforts
Oh,
to sell
okay.
it.
Yep.
If it's not sellable, we'll just tell the state we tried and it didn't sell.
And then it's done?
After the second sale, doesn't it just stay on over the counter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
you
think
have
it
to
was-
wait-
Does it
In
revert back to
perpetuity.
282?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and then, for 30 days, we can't sell to commercial properties or convey the property. But after 30
They put
days,
some interesting rules in there.
yeah, after 30 days, we can convey the properties or sell the commercial.
Yeah.
So what happens if the appraised value is 30,000, it doesn't sell?
Yep.
Goes to over the counter and I come in and offer you 5.
Do we have to take it if it's below tax value?
So I think it has to be offered at auction at that value first.
But then, if it doesn't sell there, then can I buy it for any price?
Well, we can lower the price at the next auction to a minimum value.
And I think the minimum value for us is always gonna be the taxes owed.
Okay.
Taxes and assessments, whatever that is. So what if the minimum's always there's gonna be a floor. You can't just buy it for $1. That's never gonna be the case.
Okay, but there's been property that's been acquired where the city took off some of the specials.
Yep.
Sure, and we can work with the city too, I think, on that.
Yep, that same process is still gonna apply to
It is,
a
okay.
large extent. The big change is classification and us required to sell it. So that process of the 2016 to 2023, you don't particularly, unless you have any questions about it, that'll be handled administratively through our departments. So no action needed by the board. Important in going to the third classification of properties, which is now going forward.
I have one
Okay.
question.
Couple more questions?
Yeah,
So-
sorry, we won't go, we
So
won't skip
that
past it then.
beautiful property that nobody bid on out at what lake is that?
Boulder,
Boulder,
Yeah.
Shallow?
yeah, Boulder and Shallow.
So where does
Deer.
that fall on this then?
That's pre-16, so we go
Oh.
through 282 with that.
And we
Okay.
send no revenue to the state then?
Nope, we still get to, yeah.
Pre-16.
Then we'll apportion that throughout the county, the
Yeah.
taxing district.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll be in the same old statutes that,
Mhm.
And
that
then
we're
you had-
used to.
You had
That
questions?
was exactly
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
So-
Anyone else before we go on? Anyone else have a question?
I read one spot that said minimum price is appraised value,
That is the minimum for the first round of selling.
first round,
Yeah.
second round.
Second round is minimum bid, basically, which we're gonna have a minimum bid at least tax value and assessed value, taxes owed. And hopefully it's more than that, but, at that point, we're just trying to get it off of the tax forfeited rolls.
And then if it doesn't sell at that point,
Yeah.
it just goes on over the counter until somebody does?
Yep, it reverts back to straight, the old kind of way of doing it, over the counter. Anybody can come in and, pay for it if they want to, buy it.
Hypothetical, a piece of property doesn't sell, through the whole process, we end up with it as tax forfeited land.
Yep.
5 years later, we decide to sell it again. Does the state take revenue from that then?
Anything 2016 and going forward, yes. No matter what happens, if it ever sells, it's that, and depending on whether it's 2027 or pre-2027, it's 75 or 85
In
for the state.
perpetuity going forward?
Yep, that's gonna be the
That's a
law
good
going
deal for
forward.
the state.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a short-term loss for them, but long-term.
Short-term loss, but
long-term gain.
long-term,
That's
no
correct.
work, all revenue.
And if I understand
We do
correctly, it
work.
goes in the general fund, so they don't have to even be accountable?
No, it's general fund. Yep.
On those several dozen, have there been any timber sales on any of those?
No, so there was one that forfeited near Straight River, west of town here. There was a timber sale, but the cost cleaning up that property way outweighed any, yeah, it would've we would've lost a lot of money on that if we would've sold it, so.
So that was my question to Jeff prior to the meeting. So at the 15 or 25%, what if that doesn't cover our cleanup costs? Then the county has to bear that cost.
We would, although we could build it into the sale price, and say that, and put that as part of the taxes owed, and put that value in
Okay,
there.
okay.
If there's gonna be a cost to the county, we can,
10 to
Working
15
it.
years from now, AMC will be advocating for a bigger cut.
yeah,
You can see it
15% in
Oh,
perpetuity
absolutely.
is gonna be rough for the
It's
counties.
not gonna be,
And we can do our administrative costs, but we'll have to be very specific about how much money it costs us as departments to actually administer this statute. And right now, that's not built in unless we claim it. So it's gonna be taxes owed, interest, and any assessments right now is what they're thinking, but, I think counties will start saying, no, we want an additional 1,500 or whatever it is because of just the cost of paying our employees to do this.
Yeah, so the reporting that needs to be done, are you reporting any of this now, or is that something that you'll have to build into the cost
Yeah,
also?
we'll have to make a system to,
Cause you're not submitting a report like what they're asking currently, right?
no, not at this time, no.
Okay.
No, so, yeah, we'll have to make sure to document all the costs and,
Would we not
Time
then
into this.
maybe abate some lead paint in a house or something like that? Can we not do some of that stuff to avoid the costs?
As far as, so a property, I'm just thinking through that, a property forfeits, and has a house up. And there's some lead paint or asbestos or
Asbestos,
whatever
yeah.
the case may be. What is the county's responsibility in dealing with that before we sell it? And the answer is none. We have no responsibility whatsoever to do anything about it.
Okay.
That is for the buyer to deal with. I mean, not to say that the county couldn't, but it would be on our own dime, if we wanted to fix it up ahead of time.
But we don't normally do that, do we? We only do cleanup costs if like, by the way, how come the place down by Akeley on 30, why is that not cleaned up?
So, not funny, but there's a long story behind all of that. When we did the order, I think I had said the property owner, as far as I could tell, had just recently died.
Yep.
And so it was the son and daughter that, the estate that I was hoping would take action. I know the son at least, and I'm not surprised that he did not do anything about it. But what has happened, because I got a call from Clarice over at Social Services, who is phenomenal, by the way, if you guys haven't heard that from Brian, she's very good at what she does. She found that there's an MA claim for the decedent and wanted to know if we could probate the case. And I said that would be ideal, because when we probate, we can actually clean it up as well. As the PR, you can pay for that to be done and take it out of the estate. In the meantime, it tax forfeited. At which point, it's now it's in the redemption period currently, and has been sold at auction, which is a funny, I shouldn't say it's funny, but for some reason, I found it humorous, that somebody bought it in the tax forfeiture sale, but the estate is actually selling the property as well, so they have a buyer lined up as well. So these two individuals, the buyer from the estate and the tax forfeited buyer, kind of butted heads about cleaning it up, because they both immediately started to try to clean it up, and found out that there's two owners, sort of, not really. In any event, it will be cleaned up very shortly. There's a number of people involved at this point. It'll work out well, but it's just taking a little bit of time. That's the backstory on that. But, all right, so, lost my train of thought. So settlement timeline, let's go to that real quick on the slideshow. Just kind of showing, see that a little bit better. So that's the settlement timeline as it relates to any individual who has a claim from 2016 to 2023. Again, not really important for the board to know, as that's going to go through our claims administrator, as I noted, and the state put up that $109 million.
And what's the length of time that they have to come with a claim?
You know, that's a great question. I was talking to the attorneys on that, and they told me, and I'm trying to remember what it was. I believe.
we read it in the statute that it's, they must claim within 6 months of sale.
Yeah, but going backwards from 2016 to 23, do they have
The houses
6
that have already
months
sold.
from?
Oh.
To get into, to make their claim to the
Yeah.
claims administrator. I want to say that the deadline is the end of 2025, but I don't know that for sure.
Is this deadline to file claim 270 days after notice date, not what we're looking for?
That's right. It's going to be notice of the settlement. That's right. The settlement just hasn't happened. That's why nobody knows exactly what that day will be. But suffice to say, 9 to 10 months from whenever, this month probably. I think it's going to become official this month sometime. So what, February of next year, March of next year, something like that. All right, inventory sale, county requirements. So we have to identify each property, which has been done. Make a good faith effort to sell it again. This is sell for market value. And if that it doesn't work, nobody buys it, then we can take minimum bid as long as we're getting our costs, and then it goes over the counter if nobody bids on that. This is the report that's gonna be annual now to MMB, the budget department. Pretty strict, pretty self-explanatory. We just explained that we tried.
Most cases going forward, there just isn't gonna be a lot of revenue to be had, is there?
Not for, I mean, the big thing for us is we're gonna get our taxes back. That's the reason they tax forfeited. So we're gonna get, what it is that drives what we do, which is our taxes. The 25 to 15%, it's a hit, but for Hubbard County standpoint, and this is a better question, not for me, but I don't know that that's been a huge amount of money for us anyway. For Hubbard County specifically. I mean, again, Hennepin, Ramsey, different ballgame. They have millions and millions of dollars with this stuff, which is why the 109 million is what it is. But for us, I would think that the claims, and this is just off the top of my head, our total claims are gonna be less than $1 million for sure. I mean, it's gonna be 500,000 less. It's probably $500,000 less than that, for Hubbard at least.
So we aren't gonna have to look at changing how we're funding the parks?
No. So still 20% of the total overall revenue goes to parks, and most of that comes from timber.
Yeah,
Which just a minor part comes from land sales. So it was a different deal with the last auction. We had some more high value parcels on there. And, I believe Chip put them on there to put more funds toward Deep Lake Park, so.
So
Yeah.
timber revenue won't be affected.
So, yeah, we'll get to that a little bit.
The new property either, if it goes through the whole thing
They
and
have
it
a
still
caveat
stays
for
with
that.
the county, it's
Yeah, with the.
timber
with
revenue is.
Timber and mineral rights, which timber are considered mineral rights, we get to reserve even when we sell it, which is creating its own issue, which
Yeah.
we'll get to, the timber part of it.
I guess so the 20%, 25% is supposed to go in a trust, or not a trust fund, but a tax forfeit fund for the county. Will that get apportioned, that 25% every year?
To the county?
Yeah. Or does that just go in a dedicated fund?
I think it goes into the tax forfeited fund, but I believe it could just go into the general, just as
Okay.
the state could go.
remaining percentage could be apportioned the same way we were apportioned.
Sure.
That's correct, yeah.
Yep.
It's not,
Yep.
our ability to use that money will be the
Sure.
same.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so again, 3 buckets, tax forfeited property, look back is what we were just talking about. So going forward, the amendment to the tax forfeiture scheme. So as you know, previously, a property was forfeited, we put it up for auction. Well, there was a step before that, and it's still kind of in there with the DNR, but the step before we sold it was it came before the board to determine whether you wanted to classify it as something other than just tax forfeited land, and then whether you wanted to sell it. You do not have that authority anymore. They took that away. You cannot classify it as conservation anymore. It is automatically going to sale. That is a huge change.
Yep.
so if there's, surrounded by county land,
Yep.
and then there's this little dot in here that really doesn't even have access,
Yep.
we can no longer,
You cannot classify it. The DNR can. We do have to go through the DNR first. for them.
So the opportunity, and I've had conversations with administrators about that, we know when people are headed that way, right? Administratively, if we have an interest in a property, we can negotiate and purchase that before it forfeits.
Oh, okay,
So
that's how we can get around it.
That's how we
Yeah.
will have to strategically get around that, and there are, you know, probably dozens of instances where we wanna think about that. It's gonna require some more planning on our land department to identify those, but that's the only way around that, that's the only opportunity that, cities or counties would have the opportunity to say, we want that first.
Long-term plan.
Is to
Yeah.
see it just before it forfeits, negotiate and purchase, before it forfeits.
Or you could be lucky and we offer it for sale twice, and then if it doesn't sell twice, we can convey it to the county. Or, set it as, conservation land.
And, question for you, how often do we run into a situation where even before it gets to the board, the DNR swoops in and says, we want that?
Not too often that I know of.
Every now and again, but pretty rare.
Yep.
And that was my understanding as well, is that the DNR checklist isn't gonna be a ton of property, but the fact that the DNR has that authority is interesting in its own right, but that's the state for you.
Because currently we want a no net gain on our land. So if we did that, then are we free to sales? Because we own, we can then we're free to sell some other property because it's not under tax forfeited.
Correct.
Yeah.
And anything that is tax forfeited, that was forfeited before 2016, we use the old rules.
Yes, right.
So
And it's
this-
just public
we-
purpose, yeah.
Like, as he's identifying these three buckets, there's that stuff that happened before 2016, which we're using the old statute 282, which we've always done. And then we have this new process where we have to process anything forfeited from 2016 to 23. And I'm looking at this, we had 6 forfeit in 21, we had 5 forfeit in 22. You know, that's kind of the number.
about
So it's not gonna be that difficult for us. If we look back here on the inventory sale, if we get these processed in the next 2 years, we get 25%, and if we dally, then we get
They really gave us,
15%.
they gave the counties an incentive to do it quickly.
And then this, now we're on the new forfeiture law. So what happens if somebody forfeits after January 1, 2024?
It's starting to forfeit right now, or it's year 2 of no taxes or something like that. So again, the first step is gonna be to contact the DNR and see if they, after the redemption period, actually go down, there's a little bit more, and I'm forgetting something that's important at the beginning there. Let's head down a little bit further.
So real quick, going back to Char's example, then,
Sure.
is there any reason why if the county wanted to buy a particular property like that, that you just couldn't participate in the auction?
The county can, yeah, the county can make its own bid, I suppose.
Well, how about during that 3-year redemption period, can the county negotiate with the owner of it who's,
Yes, that's what I was suggesting.
yeah, that would be
During
good
the
time to
period
do
where we
that
know
then.
they're not paying their taxes, but it hasn't forfeited, absolutely. And that's,
Yep.
I think what Jeff was saying is that needs to be identified.
Yeah, for
And,
sure.
and will be, because you're well aware of what those properties are that were in that process, so.
So go back up to the previous slide, will you please, because you touched on something, and I don't know if you want to save it till later, but, so, a property gets tax forfeited, it goes on the auction, currently, we get the logging. We get the revenue from that, so once it's sold, we no longer have that? or-
No, we still do.
So, it
Depends who it
just,
sells to.
No, we reserve the mineral rights. Whoever buys it knows that we still have them.
so it's just like North Dakota and the mineral rights in North Dakota, there can be 2 owners for infinity.
The county, that basically, and this, I don't know how I feel about it. I haven't really walked my brain all the way through it yet, but for some reason it bugs me that basically we're taking any property that tax forfeits, the state and county will have mineral rights on it going forward, based off of this scheme, which,
So, but I'm confused.
Why would anybody buy the
That's
property
what
if they
I'm
don't have the
wondering.
timber rights?
Well, but we're talking about 2 different things. I mean, the property that we manage for timber
Yep.
is not the stuff that's gonna be in this sale.
It's not.
No. We are dealing.
Not even this little dot in here that's surrounded by the property that we own?
Well, if we wanna purchase that, we can
No,
purchase
say
that.
we're not,
Then
say,
they own that.
but you're saying that but the county would retain the mineral rights?
We
No,
can.
no, because they already own it. They own it before this happens. So
But if it goes tax forfeited, and we don't end up acquiring it
Yeah.
through a normal thing,
If we sell it to, yeah,
and some private entity buys it in the auction,
Then we would
the
have.
county
mineral
still
rights.
gets timber rights?
and we'll
gonna
show
wanna
that
buy
on
it?
the scheme. Maybe we just skip down to where they have that.
Okay, so then I
On
have
there.
another question. What if I buy it and I wanna clear it? Do I have to get permission from the county to cut the
Yeah.
trees down?
Yes.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
Who's gonna wanna
It's
buy
a
these
bizarre
things?
situation.
There's gonna
So
be
the
lawsuits on
this
this.
I
just
didn't know
went,
that,
the
I
state
guess.
just made these rules?
Yeah, it's the, well,
They made these rules relative to what happens in Hennepin County, and they related it to the Tyler property, and we were talking about residential parcels forfeiting. They
Yeah.
don't have a lot of thought about land.
mineral, and
So
then
AMC needs to get involved in this.
It's,
the
And
litigators
the
had to,
MRC.
the example you're giving
Yeah.
is less than 1/100th of a percent of all of the transactions that are gonna happen in the state.
I understand that, but it's still.
it matters a lot more to
The
us.
moral
And-
of the story is, you're gonna know about that long before it gets to this process.
Well, and the
if you
Iron
really
Range is
want it,
with their
as part
mineral
of that
rights is a big deal,
group
too.
of tax forfeited land that dates earlier, you need to buy it.
How's the future buyer gonna know about that?
I know,
why
that's,
There's gonna be lawsuits on this.
yeah.
Future buyer know about what?
About not having the timber rights.
Laws are the primary basis of lawsuits. New laws create new lawsuits.
Well, that and when you're buying a property, everyone does their due diligence. I mean, that you have to do your due diligence when you're buying a piece of property. You look at the property records, and the recorded deeds will clearly show that the government owns the mineral and timber rights.
How's this one more to throw in there?
Yeah, yeah.
Mineral rights are owned by somebody else right now.
They would get tax forfeited with the property.
Because property I own, I don't own the mineral rights, Pillsbury does.
Okay.
So does Pillsbury then keeps the mineral rights?
They would unless they failed to pay their taxes.
Okay.
I mean, mineral rights can be tax forfeited as well.
So if Ted didn't pay his taxes, so the land goes into tax forfeit, would Pillsbury then come along and pay the taxes to keep their mineral rights?
They would have to have been up to date on their taxes already to not lose their mineral rights.
So
They're
they're
separate.
taxed and Ted is taxed?
Yeah.
Two different,
Yeah, yeah.
wow.
Well, that clears things up.
But you should be in Texas. Texas is, they have, I mean, the area of law and mineral rights alone, because of the oil down there and gas, is no joke. In any event, the Iron Range obviously came in late to the party, and this is kind of, they have huge interest in the mineral rights issue. And that's why it kind of came out this way. Practically speaking, I have some concerns about how this is gonna work, but, we'll see what happens. All right, so
There'll be adjustments.
yeah, and I mean, it's not that confusing, but it's a lot of steps to get to where you have complied with the statute and let the state know everything that needed to be done. So I think there's a timeline down further. Yeah, here we go. The overview of the forfeiture process. So again, taxes become delinquent, either a judgment action or it forfeits. The property tax forfeits, then it's put up for auction, or no, sorry. Yeah, that first run, it doesn't really happen here in Hubbard County where we do a judgment. We go straight through the redemption period, and then we serve the NER. Are we serving NERs? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm not sure if that even applies to us. I'll look into that. That question popped up in my head and I never answered it. But the property forfeits, let's start there. We notify the DNR is what we're doing going forward, and they have the option to withdraw the property and use it for state conservation land. Rare, but they might in a few cases. If they don't,
So
then-
do we just lose out on the tax money then if they do that? The tax is owed? Because the DNR doesn't pay tax.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not 100% on all of the ins and outs of that, but people have campaigned on that issue alone, so I think that's correct.
Okay.
So they get to keep their right to make it
They do.
and we don't.
That's correct. Yep. Yep. All right, so then after the DNR doesn't take it, then we, as the county, buy the mineral and timber rights for $50. And that $50, it goes to the previous owner. That's the value that they get for it. And they get plus whatever over the taxes owed. They get that as well. So then we offer the property for sale, at assessed value. If it doesn't sell for the assessed value, we notify interested parties, or if it does, we notify the interested party of any surplus. If it does not, then we can, what's your, remember, we don't have to on the new stuff, put it up again, I don't believe.
Yeah.
I don't think we have to sell minimum bids for anything going forward. That's just the 16 to 2023 cases. So if it doesn't sell the first run, it's just a non-sold property, and then it follows the same old statutory scheme.
82, yeah.
That, yep, exactly.
I believe all unsold properties automatically reduced minimum bid and then unsold, so it would have to go twice.
Even for the new stuff?
Yep, 2020.
Oh, man, I missed that. I was thinking that they really were only looking at that 2016 to 2023. Okay, so they're saying going forward, we're selling everything.
I think Corey's right.
Yeah, no,
That they-
fair
that
enough.
It's gonna sell, and then it's, and I think.
That's an
that
interesting choice they made there.
There's been conversation amongst the administrator group that they might be trying to come up with some sort of a clearinghouse for counties to participate in for these auction sites, so we don't have to all manage these.
Yeah. That would make sense.
So that may be something to look for. And again, for us, when it's 5 a year, it's not onerous. It's just one more thing that we have to do. But yeah,
So, yeah, so then if it doesn't sell for the first time at minimum, at market value, minimum bid, second sale, if not, then it goes back to the old statutory scheme. So the prior owner who lost the property is going to get a check for any overage for the taxes owed, anything that it sold for over that, plus $50. And that $50 is the state, is us, the county, paying for mineral rights and timber. So whoever buys it at the auction, if a sale occurs, they will be on notice that they are not buying the timber rights or the mineral rights. Those are reserved to the county.
Even a lot in town?
Yep.
It's just a blanket?
Yep, every time.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And as you noted, there's not gonna be value in every case to the county on that, but the county does it every time.
Is there a way to opt out of that?
I'll look into that. I wondered that as well. I haven't heard whether or not we can, on a case-by-case basis, decline to buy the rights. We may be able to, I don't know. I'll double check on that. As I looked at it now, my understanding, the way that it's written is, we just do it every time. That's a part of a administrative process that just occurs.
So is that part of our administrative cost?
The sale process of purchasing the $50. Yeah, I know that the state was trying to help out the counties to some extent with the $109 million, but yeah, this scheme is an interesting way to do it. And I think Jeff is right. It really was negotiated for the cities as they're the bulk of these cases. There was some thought to outstate, but in any event. So the big things that I wanted to make sure you were aware of is the requirement to sell, that we don't have a choice anymore, and the unfortunate inability to classify anymore. Those are the two big things for you to know. And I don't really have anything else to add to it unless I'm more than happy to answer questions though.
Well, I do have one comment, that AMC tried to be really proactive. I mean, whenever we went to meetings,
Yeah,
they took input and then they put it all together and they tried to come up with the best possible solution just to begin with
yeah.
something.
They did this slideshow and it's great. I mean, it's exactly what I was gonna say, so. Yeah, it's really helpful. If you want a quick refresher, this slideshow alone will put you in the right mindset as to what we're doing. But again, I'm not, the timber rights issue and mineral rights, it concerns me a little bit to know that every piece of tax forfeited land will have government-owned mineral rights going
That's what
forward.
bothers
That
me.
seems a little odd to me, but that is the way it's set up.
Where in North Dakota, it's private.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Texas, but
No, it's all private in Texas, yeah.
That could be problematic, it's occasionally.
That's what I was thinking is, I mean, ultimately, the first purchaser is gonna be well aware of it, of course, and is gonna be, if we have a 40, for instance, up north in Hubbard County, that tax forfeited, somebody's buying it for hunting land, they need to know the county has the right to come in and forest that when, or, to do that when we deem that it's appropriate, when the mature trees are mature and ready to be harvested. But
So I would suggest, even though it's up to the potential buyer to learn everything, that is stated at every auction.
Yeah, and I guess I knew about the mineral rights, but I never heard about the timber rights, so I'll look into that too, and,
I'd be concerned about the second or third owner not.
That's what I was gonna
Yeah.
notice.
Next thing you know, we're in logging it off and they're not happy campers.
no,
Yeah.
no. And the mineral rights, just talking with other land commissioners, that's a way bigger deal up in the Iron Range.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It's a very big
Yeah.
deal.
Around here, at least, we don't deal with that too much, but,
If you have mineral rights, say you got a couple 100-acre tract, do you have a right to go on that land and manage the timber?
see, I never heard that, but after hearing Jonathan, I'll have to look
So
into
it's
that.
it's a matter of perspective on that. So if we own 600 acres and there's a 40 in the middle of it, and it forfeits, or we know it's forfeiting, we would buy it anyway to not have a management problem,
Yep.
right? And then we don't have any of these questions.
Right.
But if there's an isolated 40 that we hold the timber rights on, it's not gonna be worth our time to sell it, it's not gonna be worth our time to log it. If it gets built as residential, it's, from a very practical standpoint, again, the scenario, I recognize that you can shoot holes and ask questions about all these different things. We don't know until the court cases come out and people start working with it. But generally, if somebody buys a 40, we're not gonna wanna log that, because nobody's gonna wanna get everything ready to go and do that.
Well, what if they do?
And that's the question is, what can we decline to purchase the mineral rights?
Yeah, that-
And timber rights, and we might be able to, and that would solve that problem.
When
in the
they're
case by
talking
case.
mineral,
Yeah.
they're talking about the northern third of the state.
Yeah.
Right, because that's where it is, and that's where that's worth a lot of money to the state. And the timber is only worth money to us when it's, you know, in big bunches. So from a very practical standpoint, I don't see,
So in the previous county you were at, did they manage their timber? Was that part of their revenue?
as a matter of fact, in Cook County, they owned less than 200 acres. They didn't really manage any. They
So
just-
what happens when a tax forfeited piece came, they just tried to sell it?
Yeah, very often. The vast majority of the public lands
Uh-huh.
up there is federal or state.
Yeah,
DNR.
So,
okay.
mostly federal, BWCA.
That sounds right. I think that's relatively common throughout the state.
We didn't even have a land commissioner.
Oh,
Our environmental service director was named the land commissioner, and now the assessor is named the land commissioner, just because somebody has to do the administrative functions, but they don't have anything that they manage.
I think Jeff hit it on the head. A lot of these possible problems likely will never become problems. And just practically speaking, they'll be worked out in some other way if they were about to become a problem. Again, it comes back to the big thing of letting you know that you don't have the authority to classify anymore prior to sale. That's a big change, and where the money's gonna end up going. I don't know that that'll make a huge impact to the budget, but it's worth knowing at least.
All those properties, TFL properties along Deep Lake Park are in the first category, correct?
Yes, it's
That's all pretty.
very minimal what's in this, settlement period, so.
We've got a total number of like 7 dozen properties that have forfeited during that period that we have to try to, if we haven't already sold or have conversation, or that we have to process. I'm showing 87, so 7 dozen properties, most of which have already conveyed, and many of which we have tried to convey and have no value, so they're just hanging out there. So we'll have to, with those properties, we'll have to go through this first and second sale option again.
Yep.
Before they will revert back to 282 for us to manage as we've been managing them.
Yep.
so I know of someone that was interested in bidding, and I don't even know if this property's still for sale, but it was somebody in town, and it was a lot next door. And so
Sure.
they just wanted to make their property larger,
Sure.
but the lot was too expensive.
Yep.
So this would be a positive thing if they could.
Yeah, for sure, you
Yeah.
could,
It would
set it at a
accomplish two
minimum bid and,
things. Yeah.
To that point, that has been a hamstring for us over the years, is that market value and not being able to move
Yep.
off of it. So that is gonna be helpful in some cases. We
Yeah.
still, important to note, have the authority under the statutory scheme to sell to the adjacent landowners, before we go public with it. which
Right,
has
but
always been a
sometimes
very
they
helpful
could,
thing to
but
do.
sometimes they didn't want to pay that price.
Yeah, and that, I think, if we do it to the adjacent landowners statutorily, I believe it still has to be market value. Then it has to go to the public, they have to not do market value, in
Then it
an
can
auction,
go
and then
back.
they can go back and they can
Okay.
purchase it for minimum bid.
Okay.
But, yeah,
And that's just the new tax forfeited properties or all of them?
Yes, well, we have to deal with the bucket from 2016 to 2023, and then that's the process going forward.
so even if we have property from pre in the first bucket, we can still use the new system on it to sell it for less than market value.
So who sets the minimum bid
County.
and based on what?
The assessor,
It's gonna be
right?
based on what we have into it, which is taxes owed.
The market,
Yeah, but we
the
have to
market
give
is set by the
85%
assessor,
to the
the
state.
minimum is gonna be
Not the
set by
taxes,
the auditor.
not the taxes. We
Oh,
get the
okay.
taxes off the top. So, let's say a good example, $80,000 property, market value doesn't sell, so then it goes to minimum bid. We set the minimum bid at 30 because the taxes owed are 25 and where administrative costs are 5. So we set the minimum bid at 30. It is 40,000 is the bid. We get 30. The county gets the 30. The 10 goes to the person who owned it before.
Okay.
Unless they aren't, we cannot find them, and we get the court to give it to us, and then that 10 goes 25, currently 25 to us, 75 to the state.
Got it.
But could we set the minimum bid at only what the county owes, or is owed to the county?
That's my understanding, is that's what it is it's the out-of-pocket from the county, which is taxes owed and, administrative fees, et cetera.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be out any money, we're just not gonna gain any revenue out of it.
As soon as we get the notice of the settlement, then we can come up, we can get this list out there, we can have a conversation about it, because as it's going for public sale, then we can explain all the different scenarios we've got going in these 75.
It's actually good because it hopefully will sell more properties.
Yeah.
That's
Back
what
to
Tom
tax
said.
rolls.
It could.
So we had some properties on the April auction that didn't sell because the prices were too high. Can we lower them and sell them this fall?
I think what I had seen from other counties was, that they were looking at this fall for the first, well, actually, the way they were doing it was the first sales of all their properties. So of the 80 or so that we have, they took all of them and put them on the auction, or they're going to this fall. And then the second round is gonna be in February of next year, to
And if
where
those
it's not.
properties were forfeited before 2016,
There were some that were within the period, the 16 to 23.
I would suggest you talk to the land commissioners and find out if you have the option of selling for a minimum price rather than a market value.
Yeah, you might
Because
be
right
able to
now,
kick those right out.
relative to market value, you have to go back and negotiate with the assessor to determine if there's a valid reason for reducing that market value because it hasn't sold.
Yep.
And there may be an administrative process whereby you can agree that there is a minimum price that will get it out the door and put it back on the tax rolls.
Yep.
So getting back to that property on Boulder, because it was pre-2016, because, at one point we talked about putting a campground there.
Mhm.
Can we still hold that off since it's prior to 2016?
Yeah, we don't need to sell it.
Okay.
Yep.
And going forward, I think Jeff hit it on the head again, if we identify a piece of property that's gonna tax forfeit, that we wanna
Right.
utilize for park purposes, or it happens to be
Yeah.
adjacent to a park we already own, we wanna negotiate prior to tax forfeiture.
Right.
And truthfully, and I did this in a city I worked in previously, we identified, what ended up happening is a house, all of a sudden it's just vacant. There's nobody there, it's gonna start falling apart quickly. So we would administratively go through the city attorney and the county attorney, and we would negotiate an expedited, well, that was, at that point, was an expedited forfeiture process, so that we could get to the point of redeeming it and doing that. But you could also manage those properties where, especially with an active HRA, where you would purchase some of those for resale, you would purchase some of those for redevelopment, you would purchase some of those to manage as managed housing. But it doesn't do anybody any good to have a home sit vacant, because from the time they walk away, and then 3 years later it tax forfeits, the damage is done, right? It's not, you can't do that. So you can become much more proactive in saying, hey, that place has been vacant for 6 months, and they've missed their first tax payment. Now we can start trying to get a hold of them and asking them what's gonna happen with that and what options we have. and if we have funds available to turn that into useful housing or keep it on the market, it's a lot cheaper to do that than it is to let them fall apart and then have a mess to clean up. You can really, this is actually gonna push us all to being a lot more thoughtful and getting involved with these properties to make sure if somebody's going to forfeiture, maybe we can help them with it, maybe, you know, it's just,
And that's something that Social Services has been doing. If there's an MA claim, that actually gives us a little bit of an opportunity on the property. And this, in the context of, a good example is a property is going tax forfeited because the owner of that property died and they didn't have any next of kin to do anything about it. So we have, and they have an MA claim because they died either in the hospital or somewhere where there were some funds being expended. We, as the county, can probate that property, and in the meantime, probating it, we can sell it ahead of time, and it doesn't tax forfeit. We go in, probate it, pay the taxes with the estate money, sell the property, and we can negotiate with ourselves, frankly. In that case, we do have to be careful not to do self-dealing, and make sure that we are offering it to other people as well. But, the MA is one avenue that we can help, kind of not get into this tax forfeited scheme if we don't want it to be. Just, yeah,
we just need to be proactive
Yeah.
in the management of these.
depending on the circumstances.
And again, for us, if it's a handful every year, it's not that big of a deal. And to back it up and be proactive with those and, wouldn't be difficult either.
Yeah.
We know when people haven't paid their tax bill.
What happens, I'm not up on the squatter issue in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I know,
They're
I've
not
read
the West
about what
Coast.
happens in California.
Yeah.
What happens in Minnesota if the house is vacant and a squatter comes in?
They need to be evicted by someone who has authority to evict them, which is a pretty straightforward process. Unfortunately, it does take a few months to do it, but we've done that through probate cases, evicting squatters. That is a very common, unfortunate thing that people do in probate cases, is immediately upon becoming appointed the personal rep, file an eviction action for whoever's sitting in there, which unfortunately is usually a adult child of the deceased. But in any event, that is a very common thing. And here, yeah, eviction, I think the issue in the West Coast, not being a lawyer out there, but they've made it very hard to evict people.
They have.
And
Yeah.
we in Minnesota, if you have the showing, you can still evict people
Okay.
generally. There are some exceptions. You can't evict sick people and that kind of stuff just for the heck of it. but, yeah, for good reasons.
So like for Hennepin, when this is gonna affect them so greatly, they're just gonna have to adjust accordingly with their levy then, aren't they?
Yeah, I think Hennepin, the new statutory scheme was pretty much drafted by them. So it is in line with what they're already doing, is my understanding of it.
Oh, okay.
So they've already been trying, they don't do a lot of conservation
Right.
lands, they get it on the tax, they sell it immediately. And I think for them, the big thing was, we want to be able to sell it. If it doesn't sell for market, we still need to get it off of county-owned land. So, yeah, I don't think they're complaining about this at all.
So this slide here might be a good point to make, is this is what we're charged with right now.
Yep.
As soon as that settlement is complete, then the clock starts ticking, and these are the things that we need to be doing. Reviewing our processes to make sure we're compliant. If there are any policies that need to be amended, make sure we're doing that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But address, identify what's before 2016, identify that bunch from 2016 to 2023, and then make sure that our policy is consistent going forward.
Yep.
And it will change. Legislatively, this is gonna change quite a bit over the next 10 years. I'm just guessing
Yeah.
because of how new it was and how quickly it had to be done.
I agree.
And better documentation too will have to take place, and all the values and fees we have put into these properties, we're gonna really have to make sure we document.
That first time that we go, because right now of the property, the 2016 to 2023 group, I think the best way going forward is to, even if they have already been on auction and just didn't sell and now they're just on, tax rolls or non-tax rolls, put them all on the auction block again and do market value. And then the question will be, how does Hubbard County policy-wise want to set the low bid the second time around? And that's something in the policy committee meetings that can be discussed on how do you want to document administrative costs, if we do at all, if we want to just go straight taxes owed,
And,
assessed value, or assessments, I'm sorry.
and we'll have to identify those that have been sold
Yeah.
that forfeited in that period of time where we haven't paid the owner, right? And I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, that's a good point.
That $109 million from the state is gonna cover what is owed to those property owners who forfeited in that period of time?
So our.
But do we have to go back and pay back if there was a loss on those ones that have already been processed? Or
No,
do we
that's
just-
the 109. So
Okay, that's the
anybody-
109.
If anyone is in that boat and contacts you, you can let them know there is, as soon as the settlement is done, there will be a claims administrator, and there'll be a phone number that anybody who has a claim can call and do their claim.
So the-
And
so
it
the-
just won't come through us.
The current liability is being handled by that 109 million.
Yep.
Then we have to deal with whatever's unsold, we have to sell.
Yep,
And then we pay a portion of that to the state,
yep.
and then we process.
And that was really the trade-off from the state standpoint was, we'll give you the 109, but we want money going forward. And that's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so supposedly it's just paying back the 100.
We'll take the liability for this period of time,
Yeah.
which is the statute of limitation look-back period. And that's our liability, is that 6-7 years. And they're taking that liability for us. It's not 109 million, it's not $1 million. But again, we're not gonna lose that much going forward either, because it's just not a ton for Hubbard County.
It seemed like a good practice going forward is to keep properties from going to the expiration of that redemption period.
And I will say this, Kay does a great job of making multiple attempts in multiple different ways of getting a hold of the owners to say, hey, what's going on? Are you guys aware you're delinquent? Because even with all of that work, without fail, every year or two, one person will come forward and say, how come you guys didn't tell me my property was forfeited?
Yes, and she says, and then they'll
every
pay
time.
the taxes plus the penalties.
Yeah, and they're always just it's just a random person will just be blown away that no one told them. And again, Kate does a really good job of trying every way she knows how to get a hold of people. And sometimes it's just not possible. Yeah.
So going forward, Corey and Jeff, you'll just let the board know, and even at a work session if we need information, and
Yeah,
Yep.
any questions?
Yep.
I would anticipate that the updates will be coming from Corey and Kay,
Yep.
okay?
and that Jonathan would be handling the court work.
Yeah, there's gonna be a
If-
little
if
court work
anything comes
involved.
up,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
Yeah, so we're hoping to have a auction September or October, so, we'll keep you updated on that. And then another thing, like Jonathan said, we'll have to have a resolution to be, part of that settlement, the state settlement, or to be included in that.
Oh, yeah, we just have to not opt out. We have until August 15th. As
Yeah,
long as
yeah.
we do nothing, we'll be in that settlement.
Yeah.
Right, because we
Yeah.
don't want the liability either.
No.
I read if you opt out, then the
Well,
county's
you're
liable.
taking the liability and still giving the state all the money that,
Yes.
yeah, it just wouldn't make any sense.
And I guess other land departments are doing resolutions. Is that something we should do?
I think we have to do a resolution if we were a named party in a lawsuit.
Okay,
But
okay.
we are not, so we
Okay,
don't have
so we
to
just
do one.
don't-
We can just
Stand back.
stand back and see what kind of challenges come up to this new statutory scheme, which will be interesting. There are gonna be hiccups going forward, so we'll see what they change. What works and what doesn't going forward. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news on losing the classification issue.
Well, this was really helpful, thank you. Are
Yeah,
there any
yeah.
further questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Great, all right.
Thank
Great
you.
seeing everybody.
Are you gonna ask for one more person to do this? Yep. All right, we'll just take a little break while we wait for Jeff to come back.
Northern Dental Access is here, they're waiting out in the lobby.
Oh, okay. Well, Tom stepped out for a minute. Should we just wait before we move forward? Okay.
Denise, do we know, are our guests here for the last?
They are.
They are here? Okay.
Yep.
And item 2 and 3 can be as long as you want them to be today. They're really just throwing them out there.
My question on item 3 is, if we put that on the board, for the board meeting next week, if we vote to accept the committee report, we can still have further discussion on the formation, correct? Because the formation I read the committee report, and there's lots of, there's a lot of things that's not decided in the committee report.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, 25 budget priorities, Jeff?
So you got a copy of an outline that I'm working with. And maybe page 2 is the most important one of this right now with the table of contents. I don't just want to give you the worksheets to work through. I want to give you a little more context and a little more dialogue. So the budget narrative will be a list of the items that are significant items that I anticipate are going to affect 2025, and just new things like, so the jail project, what does the EDA HRA decision look like relative to that? Talk about the other drivers, the significant drivers. We know what our cost of living adjustment is for 2025 because that's part of the contract. Next week, we're going to get an idea what our healthcare costs are, so we'll have that. Just to know what's moving in there. A copy of that property tax mailer that we sent out last year so that we can have conversation about what it should look like this year, what departments we would highlight. County comparisons, I think I shared this a couple of years ago where we had the levy per capita as a basis of information. And I'm working on getting that information from all the counties across the state right now. I've got about a third of them. What I need their number of employees, because the other comparison is how many employees per 1,000 people served do they have? And that number is, I just think it's helpful relative to identifying where we sit. And I like the numbers because they show Howard County in good standing. They show us as being low for taxes and moderate for the number of employees we have serving the population around here. So I like them. I think they're helpful talking pieces. And then this financial background and county financial position is just some of the charts that we always look at, but I want to put them in one spot so you can reference them before, and then we'll have a presentation on our financial management plan, I think is scheduled for August 20. We'll have the capital improvement plan, and then we'll have the proposed budget and levy for all of the different funds, right? So my question primarily to you is there anything that you're not seeing on this list that you'd like to see? And if you review this list and say, well, I'd like a report on this, or I'd like some context on that. And my intention with these historic numbers is I'd go back and look 5-10 years, and where I can project 2 or 3, like we do with our capital planning, is we can take a look and see what our expenses have been and make some projections for what we can think of. And then the other question relative to that is, what's a reasonable expectation relative to levy? And you could answer now. I don't know if the answer is going to help now because I've got to put some of that stuff in the budget narrative that's going to talk about what we're looking at. And one of the primary drivers is, and we're still in good position. I asked Maria for the number on what our new tax capacity is this year, which is that new tax capacity. So if we have 1.5% of new tax capacity, then the first 1.5% of levy is free for everybody else, right? So if we have a 3.5% levy, then it's 2 for everybody else, and it gets spread across that new. We have a 3% COLA for 2025, and we're going to have probably some costs related to healthcare. So our compensation budget is going to go up, and our compensation budget is 85% of our levy. So those two numbers are really interrelated. But I think we're in a good position. The number of new positions requested this year is really, really streamlined because I just told people we weren't going to get any. And so far, people are working with that. So I think we're going to be able to bring in something completely reasonable this year relative to budget. But background, if you see something that you'd like to see that you're not seeing, that's what I'm interested in hearing. And between now and the first meeting in August, that's when I'll fill this out so that you get this at the same time that you get your first spreadsheets.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. How about the EDA Committee Report?
I might ask if the two commissioners who are part of that process had any comments to where we are at this point. I sent you a copy of the latest draft, was it yesterday or the day before? Yesterday, because I wasn't here on Sunday. And essentially, that's the one that the committee is gonna be, is saying they're forwarding to the board. So that's the final report, based on the email that I got from Bruce last night. So your opportunity is to accept or reject or change. You can do anything you want relative to this. I think their recommendation is a combined authority. I think they have one recommended formation relative to what the new board could look like going forward. And all of those things are to your discretion. So the next conversation might in fact just be to accept the report and then to have a conversation about what you think the next steps ought to be relative to the existing authority versus a combined authority. What you think the board ought to look like, because then Ellers and I will work on drafting a resolution that will create that entity, and then we'll have to go through the process of that entity adopting bylaws and moving forward.
So Jeff and I because, so Tom and Dave and I went through the IRA training, and then I had a free half-hour session with David, what was his last name? Anyway, so I asked Jeff to be on the phone call. So we talked to him for a half hour. I envision we could put this on our agenda next week just to accept the report, but I would like us to have a work session discussion where the board can air everything that's on your mind, and we can look at the pros and the cons, and even if it takes us longer than one work session. But our board needs to weigh in and express our opinions and then move forward. That's my feeling. And when Jeff and I talked to Dave about that, he was very supportive of that.
So what we're talking about next week's meeting is to accept just the report?
Just to accept the report.
Okay, not
And
making any
then,
decisions
not
yet.
to make any
Okay.
decisions, and then at the August work session, what does that look like for agenda? So we could then start the conversation.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get all the way through in August.
I might suggest, based on the fact that the HRA is working with a 90-day deadline
Oh, yeah.
from HRDC,
Yeah,
that we plan on having the work session conversation
yep,
next week, and be prepared to have us come up with recommendations and resolutions.
so that would
And-
be part of the board meeting.
And even, we could do it as part of the board meeting
Okay,
at the end of the meeting next week.
okay,
So that the first week in August, we could actually become prepared to discuss and
that's
make
a
a
really good
decision.
point. Okay,
Otherwise, we're gonna run against
okay.
some deadlines.
So is that okay, everybody? You guys bring all your concerns, questions, support, whatever,
Ready for next week then?
next week,
Okay.
okay?
I didn't
Is
think
that
that,
okay,
yeah,
Dave?
with our next group today, I don't think it's
Yeah,
gonna
we
be
don't-
longer than a 15-minute
Yeah.
conversation, so.
Plus, I don't think any of it, I'm not prepared to
You just
do
got
a
the,
long discussion today.
three of you just got the report last night.
Yeah,
I guess the only thing to add here would be, whatever new information has come up since the last time we've discussed this. Is everybody up to speed? We had this conversation at the committee, matter of fact, because it affects the decision, is, the current lay of the land with the HRA and how that would impact the decision you're gonna make. Is everybody up to speed with where that's at?
I,
Do we need to convey all that more?
Denise asked me a similar question yesterday, and I can come up with a one-pager with the bullet points of considerations that will help to form that conversation, and I can get them out to you and then add them to the agenda for next week, so.
so then, going along with that, can you bring different scenarios as far as the 120,000, cause to me, I'm trying to think of how can that levy be most effectively and efficiently spent to benefit the people of the county? So can you just do some bullet points about how that
Yeah.
money's currently being spent, and if it came under the umbrella of the EDA, how would that be spent differently?
Financial implications, alternatives, I can identify those places in the statute where it gives you authority, and if you create that, what does that board look like? What are the options? Where's your conversation about that? Financially, how we would support it if you go this way versus this way, yeah.
And what you brought up today, so we see something that's vacant. Can the HRA under how it's currently, they go in and buy that, or does it have to be formed through the EDA board, stuff like that?
Yep.
Okay,
Because my guess is then your goal is, I mean, using the IROD example, is to be through the information and the reaction stage by the time we get to the next meeting, so that we can look at options.
we can look at options, that's right.
Options, pros and cons.
Yep.
And then get to a decision.
Yeah,
Information and reaction next week, and options and decisions, first meeting in August.
okay, does that sound good to everybody? Okay,
What I would recommend, I'll just share with you what I sent to Bruce when we were voting.
okay,
I'm in favor of a countywide EDA and agree with most of the report. The areas I believe the county board will have to make the final decisions are EDA board should be 5 to 7 members, contract for services versus setting up a department in county government. And as the county representative on the Hubbard County HRA, I know the current HRA board members would like to continue to serve, but I know that may not be possible. So that's just kind of like what I told Bruce and, now told you guys. And another thing is the report, I don't want to talk about the fine print, but the fine print is under number 6, county EDA powers. It's important to read the Minnesota statutes 469-090 to 469-1081.
so we should do that before next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's information in those statutes that aren't part of the report.
Okay.
And even stuff, like I say, I haven't been through all of them, but I've been through some of them. And, like I say, the things that weren't covered that, I don't think there should be things that we should be aware of.
Well, I think, didn't you share at the last meeting about the townships and a 5-year?
Yep, that's one of the things, it's, and in the committee report, Bruce kind of addresses that, where I can't remember exactly which section it is, but it's basically spelled out that if we do all of a sudden decide to start a levy or something, that would be a place where maybe is that then in the bylaws or something?
So that's one thing that is called out in the report, but it's one of those insider things where you know it's there because you know it's there. That if the board has a resolution that establishes this authority and this board format, and could even cook in there the idea that says, hey, in 2 years, we're gonna relook at this. But then the bylaws would simply say that relative to the opt-in, opt-out, if this happens, then that we're suspending the 5-year and they'll have an option at that point again. So that is part of the process.
Yeah.
And after the conversation next week, then Bruce and I can draft resolutions and propose bylaws. So you would be able to answer those questions, but they will all address that information in the EDA section of 469. So that's, the standard bylaws and resolution would cover all of those powers. Which ones are you claiming? Which ones, are you limiting any of them? Are you holding any of them off? Are you identifying that the intention is not to adjust the levy, specific for economic development? All of that would go in there. And then that little asterisk that says that if this changes, then there will be a new opt-in, opt-out period.
Yeah.
Yep, so,
And even with bylaws, we can change them in the future. It's one of those things I've found in other committees. It's some of the committees, it seems like we're reviewing the bylaws all the time. It's kind of like, can't we put those things to rest for a while?
yeah, if you look at Otter Tail County, Wright County, Sherburne County, you will see iterations of their enabling resolution, because they've changed their bylaws and the resolution by which the power is acting. And typically what ends up happening is they choke it down in the beginning, and then they say, well, we need more powers, and they come back and they say, yeah, we can we can do this. So that can be part of the conversation as well. But if we generally talk about the board composition and what you think the general powers are, then Bruce and I can translate that into bylaws and a resolution to support that decision and hopefully the decision in the first Tuesday in August. Because one of the big primary considerations is how do we get from where we are to where we want to be? What steps have to happen? And I'll throw this out there, if the determination is to create a combined authority, the first action would be to create the combined authority, and then it would be to terminate the existing HRA board and create the combined board. Format notwithstanding, that's completely up to you, but that's one possible way this could happen. The other possible way is you leave the HRA where it is and say, let them figure it out, and we'll create another authority. That looked much more likely 2 months ago. Now with the news relative to HRDC and not knowing that. But part of the management challenge is, A, we have to have stability in financial reports. B, we need our housing to continue to be stable. And then C, we've identified that we need somebody with that specialized real estate license to be able to run those programs that HRDC is doing now. But who's going to do it in the future, and how does that affect what the decisions are relative to any county staffing?
So will you put in that report, the date, the 90 days?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, I'll identify all the relative, when did the notice come, when would that date be?
Okay. Okay, or can we move on to the Northern Dental? Okay.
And I'll try to get that out as sooner rather than later, but no later than getting the agendas out.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
And I have an Ellers investment update at 11, so
Yeah,
I won't-
okay.
I won't be going on
Oh,
the
you
tour.
won't be going on the tour, okay.
Well,
Hi,
question,
welcome.
Jeff. So, you know, if we don't hire a staff person, you could use Ehlers for a lot of the, any tools
Are you
we would
Jeannie?
have to
I
implement.
am. Okay. Hi,
Welcome.
Commissioner.
You could just
We're happy to
use
have
that
you.
in the short
Thank you
term.
for helping me set it up.
It's a possibility.
Not my preference, but yes, it's possible.
It's a possibility.
So do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jean Larson. I'm the Executive Director of Northern Dental Access Center. Our primary clinic is in Bemidji, and we have 3 other satellite locations, most recently here in the community of Park Rapids. But I have with me John Fick, who is our Director of Administration and Strategy?
Strategy.
I have to remember his title. And one of our board members, Rita Albrecht. And we were just here because it's overdue to give you an introduction to our new clinic here in Park Rapids, and to respond to any questions, and just to say thank you for letting us join your community and help with the issue of dental care access. I crossed paths with Commissioner Christensen at the Prime West Health meeting, and it alerted me to the idea that we should probably connect with the county. So thank you for letting us be here.
So in looking at your presentation that you sent us, if I can jump ahead to the end where you had your growth in the next 24 months, it's very ambitious, and I'm excited for the potential patients. But being a member of the Prime West Board, there's not a lot of dentists that want to handle this group because the payments are lower. So my question to you, when I looked at, because you've expanded, which is wonderful, but quite frankly, how can you afford to expand and run the clinics?
It's a fair question, and I'll just jump right in if you don't mind. So we are a nonprofit community clinic, and our affiliation or our designation as a critical access dental provider makes those reimbursements a little bit higher than what the private sector is able to access. And so that's one reason. The other is we are solely focused on the Medicaid population, and so we've just really refined a system and a set of processes that is highly efficient, that we have been able to make it work, and as a nonprofit, we're able to augment the losses with grant revenue. And so you'll see a small, simple graph that shows, that while 87% of our revenues are those Medicaid reimbursements or fees for services from patients who are unenrolled, the rest will come from grant funds and philanthropy. And then we're also very lean, as you can tell. We are.
Yeah,
our
6% of the
yeah,
administrative.
Yeah,
rate.
so we benefit from the agility that comes with being an independent nonprofit. We can move and adapt really quickly. And then we originally had wanted, as you may know, this region that we all sort of serve, there's 100,000 people enrolled in Medicaid throughout Northwest Minnesota. So it's a large number, and the private sector, is struggling to handle providing access to those. We wanted to make Bemidji even bigger, but the capital expenditures and such just didn't allow for that. So at the same time, a couple small clinics that were starting to struggle and we were fearing they would close, made sense to look more toward this satellite idea, keep the small offices in smaller communities open, but then we can centralize our claims administration, our personnel and HR functions, our policy and advocacy, and all of those things are centralized in the Bemidji location. And then we can also staff share across. So we've got some agility built in to this approach that, we live on the edge, like many nonprofits and many health and human service agencies do. But so far, it's worked. Each satellite center is, self-sufficient, and then we augment that with the grants. Does that answer your question?
It does, and even by doing the satellites, instead of just having one central, it helps actually to serve more people because transportation is always an issue.
Exactly. Yeah, we can reduce wait times and travel time. As you see in our approach to care, we have truly learned the social determinants of health, and for us, it's those things that get in the way sometimes of people in need accessing care. And so we've developed a sort of wraparound support system for patients. We have community health workers available, and we partner with community agencies in order to help address those barriers. And certainly we know the distance can be one of those barriers. So, and we want to make sure these small clinics stay open wherever possible.
Do you offer full service as far as if someone needs a bridge or an extraction, or is that something that you have to refer on?
So there is a snapshot of the services available. In essence, it mirrors the Medicaid benefit set, which is not the full array of private sector dentistry that you might be familiar with. It is more safety net dentistry. It is the basics. Now, we don't do crown and bridge at this time. We're exploring being able to do it. For the most part, in years past, that was the private sector's, wheelhouse, and we kept a promise to sort of not infringe on competing with the private sector. As they have continued to struggle with their own challenges in meeting the demand for care, it's possible we will get into that, but as of now, no. We can do surgical extractions, not full-on anesthesia like you would in an oral surgeon's office, but there's some middle ground there where we can do many. And we've got a number of oral surgically trained dentists in Bemidji, and so we may use Bemidji as a referral site. Keep in mind, we've only been open about 5 weeks here in Park Rapids, so we're still sort of getting our feet wet and not at full capacity at this time. But we're open and accepting new patients, and it's going very well.
I know in my district, it's the northern part of the county, some people are already being able to access in Bemidji. So it's nice that you're now down in Park Rapids to help all of Hubble County. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. It's a values-based approach. We're really proud of the culturally competent and welcoming environment that we set for people in need, and so we're just really happy. It's such a gorgeous building. I hope you'll come over and walk through it if you've not been in it. We're just really pleased to have it.
Gene, if you don't mind, just a quick word with, in respect with Commissioner Christensen's question. In addition to everything Gene covered, by having that Bemidji as the main office, it's also, as we've started to expand, and you can see that you're looking at the map, it's the hub of the wheel. So we can offer not just centralized claims, but also staff. All these, Park Rapids and Bagley are obviously easily commutable on a daily basis for folks. So if we need to send a dentist down here for coverage, we can do that, or to Bagley, et cetera, or hygienists. So it really offers us a lot of flexibility in serving these clinics that we wouldn't have just one-off, and we're also exploring other economies of scale. New claim system, we'll be introducing a new phone system that makes it a great patient experience and a seamless patient experience. So those are also factors for us too. We really want to ensure that the people we're serving not only get served, but get served with respect and dignity.
I don't know if you kind of answered the question I had, is whether or not the Park Rapids office had their own licensed dentist. So it's a dentist that comes from Bemidji?
We were able to keep, so most of the staff that were originally employed by CHI St. Joseph's Clinic, we were able to keep. And one of their dentists stayed, so he's a full-time employee. So there's continuity of care there, and the two hygienists stayed, 2 assistants, and the front desk assistant has stayed. So we were really pleased to preserve those jobs and keep a continuity of care, because we essentially assumed the patient base that was already being served. So all of those folks are welcome back. We closed for a few weeks to kind of rebrand and get our technology upgraded. But those are all welcomed back and maintained in the same system. And then by way we schedule, we've been able to open up to new patients as well. And now we will augment that with, our model is to use independent contract dentists who are at varied stages in their careers that maybe want to just make extra money for a daily rate and add a couple days a month here and there. That's how we will kind of build up the capacity of this clinic. Right now we have 2 that are planning to come in the coming months. They'll add a few days a week. We have a full-time dentist joining us in Bemidji who will also come a few days a month. So right now this clinic is operating at about 35% capacity. We'll be able to get it up well beyond that here by the end of the year. And in addition, our longstanding partnership with Community Resource Connections, it's a nonprofit organization that provides service access, helps people in need to connect with services that will help them address barriers to care. They have full-time MNsure navigators, and in the clinic we will have a full-time MNsure navigator to help people get enrolled and stay enrolled in MNsure. So that's a nice partnership that we're going to be able to bring. So by the end of this calendar year, I fully expect this clinic would be rocking and rolling in a way it hasn't been in the past. So we're really, really excited.
Anything else?
Yeah, go ahead, Rita.
I just have to say that one of the interesting things to me about the model that Northern Dental Access Center uses is that Jean talked about the social determinants of health, and we try to meet people where they are. And so a lot of times low-income population will have trouble getting transportation to the dental clinic or to their dentist. And so missed dental appointments are one of the biggest expenses for regular dentists. And so Jean and her team looked at how can we make sure that people show up for their appointments, because it's the same for us. We don't want to have that dentist sitting available and miss an appointment. Can you just share, Jean, what are some of the innovative things that the dental clinic has done to encourage, coming to the appointment or keeping their appointment or going to the next step with their treatment plan?
Well, again, I think that's the use of the community health worker model that just helps meet people where they're at, address their issues, build trust, and connect with other services. And so if it is transportation, we know those phone calls to make. If it is that their insurance or their Medicaid is all of a sudden inactive, and what do I do about this? We have the people who know the phone calls to make. And by partnering with, we have legal aid, so we know how to help people address legal issues that might be getting in their way. We work with the foster homes, the shelters, the substance use disorder folks, just to help connect people with the care. And by way of the, Rita's right that another economic factor for the private sector is this no-show rate. And we have a more air traffic control style of scheduling that by acknowledging that 20 to 30% of patients may not get there in any given day due to the barriers that they encounter. Number one, we help address their barriers, but we also can kind of fill in with what we call flex appointments, people who are willing to sit for another hour or so and wait, and we know that they can get in, and so it helps us build efficiencies that the private sectors struggle to maintain. So there's a lot of moving parts that make it an efficient model and while at the same time meeting the needs of the patients. And I don't want to gloss over, I think it's important to know that we have been partnering with St. Joe's since our early days of inception almost 20 years ago. So if any of you remember Dr. Dan Rose, and who helped build the original St. Joe's Community Dental Clinic, he was our mentor in Bemidji and helped us understand what access to care really meant and how to approach that. And over the years, we've partnered with that organization, and then when it became CHI, we continued to partner with them. We helped during COVID to take their overflow when they had to close, and over the last few years have been helping with management contract to provide guidance on how to be more efficient and become more financially sustainable. And then in these last few months, you know, they made the decision that it would really be best to maintain access in the community if they divested themselves of that and allowed us to come in with our models. So we're just incredibly grateful that they let us make that transition, and that we were able to figure out a way to finance it. It came up at the same time as Bagley's private practice office was announcing its sale, and so we did both at the same time. It was a very big risk, but it's settling out nicely, and we're just really pleased. So as you look to your health and human service priorities, you know, we hope that we can continue to be a good partner for you. If you need anything, if you have any questions or concerns. Prime West is, of course, a valued partner of ours as well, because they're in Beltrami County and Clearwater County, where our Bagley office is, so we partner close.
It sounds like you're more than just a dental clinic.
That was the original intent. If the social determinants of health will say, you know, having actual access is still only 10% of the problem, right? There's all those other determinants, and so by recognizing that, it's forced us to look outside of the dentistry itself into the larger community and build the partnerships where needed, so that we can all help the folks that we care about.
I would also just add, so I've done part of what I do is a lot of outreach and connecting with communities at large, beyond just from a dental perspective, but with respect to the local dental population, reaching out to them. All the dental offices that I visited here and also out to Walker, extremely happy that we were able to make this acquisition and expand access for that population that we do serve. They all recognize that the private sector just isn't able to offer that volume of service to meet the need that's out there. So we do believe in partnering with private entities as well, and we want to be a good neighbor and member of the community, joining the Chamber of Commerce and being active. We've done a lot of work in Bagley. We plan to do a lot of work here in Park Rapids as well. So we don't just want to view ourselves as an outside entity coming in. We want to view ourselves as part of this county's community.
Well, I really thank you for coming and doing the presentation. I used to work for a nonprofit, and it's exhausting. So I thank you for your work, and the neat thing about this is you can take, the nonprofit allows you to take your passion and then make it work to serve the clients. And we talk about this all the time at Prime West, that this is such a needed area. And so it's wonderful that people are getting services they need.
Well, thank you, and again, we're just really grateful to be able to make the introduction, help you get to know us a little bit, and know that we're side by side with you as you look to the health and human services needs of your population. I brought some of our, I can maybe leave them, but just our RAC cards that have the contact information. So if you encounter community members at all that do need access to care, it has all 4 of our location contact information and such. We're really excited if we can recruit a few more dentists and get all of our clinics up to 100% capacity. That's what that chart shows. We can meet our 3-year goal in 1 year if we could find those dentists. So we just really, again, appreciate this opportunity. And you want to come on over? Is that the plan, to come on over?
Yep,
And
is
see?
everybody able to come? Okay,
It's just a walk over about 2 blocks. There will be patients in the building, so we just ask that you be respectful of that, but we'll just kind of do a walkthrough. Has anyone been in it before?
When it was the OI clinic.
When it was the old eye clinic, yeah. It's really a sight to see, so I hope that you will come and we'll show you around and maybe hopefully get to meet Dr. Neese, is the dentist that has stayed, and he can also answer any questions too. So, well, let's do that.
okay, first we need a quick motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ted moves,
I'll second.
Steve seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you,
why don't you
everyone.
do that? Thank